called 12 hours a week because that's the amount of time that the average small business person spends in promoting themselves each week. To set the scene, here's a slide from Marketing Sherpa, which illustrates the growth in Web Point 2 activity. That and emailing to house lists is on the increase, while we can see that things like radio, event marketing and print advertising are all very much on the decrease. In the 21st century, we now have an approach focusing more on relationships, on connecting with people that we're not so sure who they know, and basically functioning on a experimental basis. This is in stark contrast to what happened in the past, where we had a very traditional approach. We focused on results and we tried to home in on people who we knew to be important. I think the issue that we have today is that we have to strike a balance between these two approaches. How much randomness do we actually need in our business model? How much should we be purposeful? How much should we be more open to new things? But I think whatever balance you do strike, three things are very clear about interacting with other people. First of all, you need to be really clear about what you do and what you want. Secondly, you have to integrate relationships and results. We need both in order to work in the knowledge economy. And you need to be able to give a great delivery and a quick response. Not everybody, of course, thinks there's a need to change. Small businesses who operate locally still operate in a very traditional way, and the corporate sector is still very much likes to be in control. We carried out a research project with using 600 small companies, and we wanted to know how they marketed themselves, because what we wanted to see was how far people actually wanted to use these new tools and how far they were actually happy to stay with the old tried and true transactional approach. In fact, what we found is that people marketed themselves very much in terms of a balance between conventional and online marketing. And it was really, we were interested in sorting out who's in the new camp, who's not in the new camp. Our research projects wanted to track down how companies marketed themselves. How did they sell? What was the balance between conventional online marketing that they used? Did they use face-to-face networking, or did they use social media and do some of the strain online? And how much purposeful activity there was, how much randomness did they need in their business model? Who had a value for randomness? We wanted to know who was in the new camp and who wasn't. See, as we all know, the reality of small company marketing is it's all about generating leads. You need a strong story to connect you to your customers, and you only have so much time available for sales and marketing, about 12 hours on the average, but it can't be dear and it can't eat into your time. You need to use the internet to prospect for you, to generate warm leads, and we found that people who are clever at this can get a 40% boost in what they do. So this is what they actually do. There's a heavy emphasis on face-to-face activity. If we total the two columns, we get which is people who either depend on or use regularly these different activities. You'll find that one-to-one selling is still top of the tree, and use of networking and social networks is next. We find that there's a chunk of about 30% of the people use tools like workshops, PR, online advertising, email shots, and after that it tails off. Blogs are used perhaps by nearly 20% of the people, but when you get down to it, there aren't very many people really actively using telesales, exhibitions or leaflet drops. We asked people about how big a home networking group they wanted to work with, and most people felt they wanted to work with between 20 and 40 individuals. But some people want to use very many more. Hundreds and thousands of networking partners are appropriate in certain circumstances, and we wanted to dig into what it was. Now, we do find that there isn't actually a trade-off between online and offline activity, because we found that people who spent more than 8 hours networking online also did the same offline, and vice versa. But what we did find was that everybody builds trust in the same way. It's very important to be clear about what you do. It's very important to get back to me quickly if I'm going to take you seriously, and you need to have a good attitude in terms of cheerful, can-do, enthusiastic activity with an emphasis on giver's gain, which is where you expect to do a few favours first before you expect to get anything back. So it looks like if you divide it up, you can see that the scalable businesses, there tend to be somewhat more of them than the non-scalable businesses, and again you've got slightly more national and global ones than local ones, but you can see that there are 4 main categories of behaviour. Group 1 is a conventional local business, Group 2 is a conventional growth business, and Group 3, which is really the most interesting group, are people who are selling their time but on a sort of national scale. And they're the people who are most effective at using the internet intelligently, and we call them gifted amateurs. Now what we found is it turns out that if you analyse how these different groups use social media, the ones who are national are the ones who actually use it. You can see that people use LinkedIn more than twice as much if they're national businesses than if they're local. Same is true of Twitter, same is true of blogs, and the same is true of whether they see value in serendipity, of chance in their networking. By contrast, the local businesses are more likely to want to work in a sort of small group and do traditional networking, face-to-face passing of referrals. 2/3 of the sample who were locally orientated businesses wanted to do work in this way, whereas only probably 40% of the national businesses fell into that camp. So what we conclude is that you should find a home group to network with, be crystal clear about what you do and about who you want to meet, get back to people quickly and start doing people favours. And then if you've got all that under control, then you can decide whether you need to have a strong online presence. And if so, we have ways of helping you use social media and Web 2 to build it. But the chances are that you will be in the national business or aspiring to be a national business for that to prove worthwhile to you. The people who do this best, though, tend to be good face-to-face networkers. They're effectively using these tools to provide the scenery for their own play. They recognise that they will be selling business services. They'll have to close the deal personally very properly, probably, but they need to have all of these techniques in place to back them up. And if they do it correctly, they believe it will boost their lead generation by as much as 40%. So our training programs help you to understand how to put all this together. If you need to do it, you need sources where you actually create materials, WordPress, blogs, writing things in Academy, creating YouTube videos. And then you've got a carrier medium, which will be like Twitter. And then you can basically have it end up where people will see it on your profile. That might be in LinkedIn, it might be in Facebook. Ultimately, you want to drive traffic to your site through all of these presences that you can build. And our Punch Above Your Weight program shows you how to do that. But in order to do it most effectively, to get an organic search benefit, you need to actually have the right keywords being used as tags in these different places. And we have discovered that if you use Google AdWords as a research tool, you can firm up on these very quickly and get yourself an additional benefit. The other thing you need to do is to find out who the influential people are in your industry and get them to know about you. Online, you can do that using Twitter and LinkedIn. Face-to-face, you have to work through the conventional networking organisations. So you need to know which membership organisations people belong to, understand what motivates them, and back up your activities using blogs or using PR. But you need to be clear about what you do and why it's important to them, either the end users or the influencers, because that's why you'll get referred if they're clear about what you can do and why it's beneficial. So to sum up, you've got about 12 hours to promote yourself. In that time you can write a blog article a week, you can keep a presence on 1 and a bit social networks. We would recommend that you focus on LinkedIn and probably Academy, which has the advantage of combining online and offline networking and enables you to get to know people in an online environment and then meet them face to face. And back this up with a bit of PR and some AdWords spend and maybe a few workshops. That's what people do in practice, and we can help you sort of build that into a coherent marketing mix for yourselves. So these are some things you might want to think about. How do you decide what's the right balance between purposeful and random activity? How do you get your organisation to take social networks seriously if it's important to you? And how will you recognise the people that are important to you? If you want to take it forward, we've got some workshops lined up. We've got the 12 hours a week workshop, which will basically take you through how to get your story right, how to tell it, how to decide whether you should be online or offline, and how to really get your networking lined up behind the internet activity that you carry out. If you need to go into more depth about how to build a compelling web presence, starting with the whole of that chain from AdWords through to driving site traffic through social media, we run a workshop called Punch Above Your Weight. And then, or finally, you might want to have a look at the howtodobusiness.com site,